this was probably 30 years ago, so life was very different back then. But I've had two defining moments in my life that really made me take a step back and figure out where my priorities lie. And I was working in film, and when I would work on feature films, I would be gone sometimes 6 weeks. A lot of times, if they were shot in Texas, which the majority of them were, I would come home on the weekends. I'd be gone during the weekdays, but I'd be home on the weekends. So, and that was really not unheard of, but the circle of friends that we ran with, women didn't do that. You know, mommies were not gone all during the week and then just home on the weekends. And they sure as heck weren't going to keep their marriage if that was. But I had a friend of mine come up to me one day and she said, you know, but if anybody can do it, you and your husband can. And I was like, that's so sweet. But I came home one day and it was like a Friday. And I remember I walked up to my door and my oldest son came out to meet me and give me a big hug and stuff. And he looked up at me and he goes, so Mom, so are you going to come to our house this weekend or are you going to go to your house? And he said that and I was like, wow. Okay, so my son doesn't even think I live here. He thinks I live in some other house. And that just like stabbed me through the heart. So I made the decision then after that film. I told my husband, I said, I've got to get something around here. I said, I can't, you know, my son's not even thinking, you know, that I'm part of his life. I'm just like a weekend mom. So after that time, I actually went to work as a radio DJ in a radio station, which I loved. It was fabulous. But the second defining moment was again with one of my kids, my daughter, who's the youngest. I was working on a talk show in Houston, and we lived up outside of Dallas. So once again, I would work during the week in Houston, and then I would go home on the weekends to our house in Dallas. And I remember when I got home one night, she had left out this big, huge book she had made in class. It had like, photographs of her friends and her life, basically. It was like a life book. And she had already gone to bed. And at this time, she was a sixth or seventh grader. And I remember opening the book and looking through it and looking at the pictures. And I was like, oh, this is so cute. This is so great. And then I turned the page, and there was a picture of her basketball coach that was there and her next to her. And she said, and at the bottom, I don't remember exactly what it said or how it said it. She was like, oh, and this is my favorite person, Coach, whatever her name was. She's just like my mom, but my mom's not ever here, so I talk to her just like my mom. Yeah. So when I read that, again, I was working on this television show in Houston that paid wonderfully. It was a fabulous show. It was called Texas Justice, one of those courtroom daytime shows, and I was the production manager of it. And I went back that following Monday, and we were just finishing the season out. And I went into the exec producer, and I said, there just comes a point in your life where you really got to get your priorities kind of lined up. I said, I'm going to quit the show after this season. And she was so shocked, and I told her why. And she was from New York, living in Texas while her family was in New York. And she said, I know exactly what you're going through. She said, you have to get your priorities in line. And I said, my priorities in line are my kids. I said, my kids come first. My husband and my kids come first. I said, this craft is my passion, and I will always do it. I'll always figure out a way to do it. But when it comes to me putting my kids second and this first, I just can't do it. She said, I was getting ready to make you director of this show. And I was like, I can't do it. So I quit, went home, and went to work for a production company outside of Dallas as a producer. That's when I started producing full time. And actually, this is what's interesting. I produced. It was called Studio at the Lakes. Great little place. Was producing, And my daughter's freshman year in high school, no, it was her sophomore year in high school, she came to me and she said, Mom, our theater teacher quit this year. She said, why don't you come teach? And I was like, you always hear those sayings, those that can't do teach, or whatever it is, whatever the saying is. I was like, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was go into education, the last thing. So, but I don't know what happened. It was really strange. She talked me into it. She is a very stubborn person, and she talked me into coming, and I ended up getting my teaching degree, and I started teaching her sophomore year. And it was oh my God, it was the best time. We had the best time. The students were incredible. Here in Texas, we have this thing called the University Interscholastic League. It's the oldest, it's over 100 years old. It's the oldest theater organization in the world. And they have, every year, they have this competition, and the finals, if you want to call it the finals, are in Austin every year. And Alex, these are like Broadway productions that they do, that these schools put on. It's unbelievable what these schools do. And anyway, the first year we were there, a little bitty school, 2A school, and we do the show The Miracle Worker for our contest play. And the school they'd never even got past the first round going into this competition. And we ended up going to state that year. So we beat out over 1,500 schools. Yeah, that's how many are in these things. And the best part about it is my daughter won the highest award you could get at the state competition. She actually won Best Actress. And that sounds so trivial, when you tell people this, oh, your daughter got a little acting award. But, when you beat out over 1,500 schools, but those kids had so much confidence and so much passion. And almost every one of those students that I taught those few years I was there are in the industry now. They're tech directors, actors, musicians. They got in all walks of life. So that was really rewarding to me. And I love that. And I was still acting on top of it. I would always figure out some way to keep with my agent to do stuff on the side. That was always my candy money when I would do commercials and stuff. So, but anyway, so I'm kind of going off on left track here, or right track, or whatever track it is. But it's hard to keep a timeline.
The resume, you picked out some highlights, because I'm like creating questions for you. I'm like, okay, where do I pick? I thought some things, and it was interesting, but there's some highlights, and we'll go with the first one, called Yield for Life.
Yes.
How did that come about?
I was a producer in Houston. This was before I went into teaching, and a woman who was actually the receptionist at the studio came up to me one day, and she was a writer on the side, and she brought me just one side, just one piece of paper. She said, hey, she said, can I give you something that I wrote just to look at and see what you think about the concept? And I said, sure, yeah, no problem. So she gave me, it was just one sheet of paper, and it was just a real short script. And it was so, it was very prolific, I guess is the word I'm thinking of. The story was really tugged at my heart. And this was back before, cell phones had really pretty much just started to come into the fact where you could use them in the car. I'm really dating myself. Wow. But anyway, where people were using their cell phones in the car and stuff. And that's when wrecks started to happen. All over the country, people getting in wrecks because of using their cell phone. So her story was basically a son is on his cell phone, and an ambulance comes up behind him and can't get around him because he's on his phone. And it ends up that the ambulance passes him. He follows the ambulance, and they end up pulling up into the driveway of his parents' house. And it's his father who has had a heart attack and dies because he was on the phone and wouldn't get out of the way of the ambulance, so the ambulance couldn't get there on time.
Heavy. So,
yeah, it was heavy for this one little sheet of paper that she wrote it on. I was like, so I read it and I said, boy, I bet all the emergency systems all over the country would love something like that, to put up just like as a PSA. And I said, I'm going to try and see if I can do this. And so I talked to city officials. I talked to EMS officials. I talked to fire officials. Anyway, they all got together. We got them all together in Houston. This was in Houston. And they actually pulled the money together. They pulled about $10,000 in. And back then, that was a good little budget for a film. And I directed it. And we got our producer, cameraman. I had a cameraman that I'd used for years. Got our actors. And the great part about it was the fire department and EMS officials and the police all band together and gave us all their vehicles. So we had a fire truck, an ambulance.
Wow.
I got to use my parents' house. And we shot this thing like in one day. And it turned out beautiful. The guy who shot it did an incredible job editing it. He did a great voiceover. Everything turned out really nice. It was very, very well done. And then we sent it out across the country to all of the emergency, fire and all those guys all over the country. And then they started showing it as a PSA. And I had a lot of comments from fire departments and from police and everything. And just to know where, I think it was like, I don't remember where it was now, Michigan or something like that. I got an email from a policeman, and he said, "Hey, we've seen your PSA on TV, and we love it. We think it's really effective." He said, "But I just want to let you know, I actually stopped a lady the other day." I'm trying to remember what the situation was, but anyway, the woman told him. She said, "Yeah, I know I'm supposed to pull over now because I saw this commercial where this guy's dad died because he wouldn't move out of the way for the ambulance." And he said, "So I just want to let you know, it was actually very effective." And I was like, nice. I made a difference somewhere. How cool. So that was kind of like my first toe dipped into raising money and doing a project from beginning to end that turned out really well. So I was proud of that.
I would be too. That is a really important project. You don't realize how much you can affect people and who's watching it. Just like one of my previous guests, Debbie Ortiz, doing Code 9, Officer Needs Assistance, bringing awareness to PTSD and police officers, law enforcement, and first responders. Your little project can mean so much more than you ever think it could. And it's important for you to get it out there and explore it. This seems so out of her realm as an actor, but she took it and went with it, and all the resources were available to her, and she made it. That's great stuff. I love her telling us when she got her first paycheck from a stage gig. That's great. See, you can make a living doing it. You can get paid for it. It is quite possible. And you'll definitely hear a lot more in part 2, but you got to wait till next week. So that'll be waiting for you guys. I will leave the links and show notes to the stuff she mentioned here at the artistreallymatters.com website. So go over there. So you could go there, and there's links to all the ways you can subscribe to the show, whether it's through iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify. There's so many more I've listed there. I just don't remember. There's a few new ones. I think there's one called Deezer. That's new. But hey, there's plenty of ways to listen to The Artist Matters. So go share it with a friend and subscribe and give a rating, and I appreciate it. Very thankful for that, and very thankful for being here in the month of December. And this is officially show number 40. That's right. We've reached show number 40. Yay. Thanks for sticking around and supporting the guests on the show. And all their links are available on theartistreallymatters.com. You could check out their websites, follow them on social media, see if they're going to be performing someplace, whether it's doing stand-up or playing in a band. Or you can go check out their other places. They have Etsy shops. You can buy their products. Or if you need something designed for you, There's so much they can offer.